Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the podcast that brings a voice to the voiceless. My name is Asha Kalatal.
And my name's Luisa Vieira. Today we will discuss the tragic events of the Syrian civil war that marked its 10th anniversary in March 2021 and is still ongoing.
Today's podcast will include a personal interview with Ahmad, a Syrian refugee who will talk about how one of the longest civil wars of modern history has changed his life.
He was an active participant in the Syrian Revolution of 2011, passionately documenting the turmoil in his city and fighting to expose the regime's oppression. After his uncle, a brigadier general, defected from the regime, Ahmad's family fled to Jordan, where he worked multiple jobs to support himself. In 2016, they resettled in America after an extensive vetting process, and Ahmad faced the challenges of adapting to a new culture and language.
Starting from a dishwashing job, he quickly rose to become a cashier and currently works in a trucking business and learned English, demonstrating resilience and determination in his new life. Now, before we begin, let's start by really going into what were the root causes of this conflict.
Yeah, so even before things heated up, Syrian society was not necessarily at its highest point. There were issues with job scarcity, shady dealings, and a serious lack of political freedom, especially under President Bashar al-Assad, who took over from his father in the year 2000.
So the Syrian refugee crisis began in March 2011 as a result of one of many violent government crackdowns on public demonstrations, one specifically being in support of teenagers who were arrested for anti-government graffiti in the southern town of Dara.
But when the government responded with violence, things went from bad to worse. The arrest sparked public demonstrations throughout Syria, which were violently suppressed by the government security forces. And before long, people were picking up weapons to defend themselves and their neighborhoods.
Assad wasn't having any of it, though. He called it all foreign-backed terrorism and promised to squash it. The conflict quickly escalated, and the country descended into a civil war that forced millions of Syrian families to flee their homes. 13 years later, the conflict is ongoing, with Syrians continuing to pay the price. More than 16.7 million people in Syria are in need of humanitarian assistance, accounting for more than 70% of the population.
It wasn't just Syrians versus Assad anymore. Hundreds of rebel groups formed, and soon it was an all-out civil war.
So now that we've covered the basics, Ahmad will be joining us to share his first-hand experiences on everyday life in Syria and coming to the U.S. as a Syrian refugee.
So, hi Ahmed. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hello there. I'm really happy to be here, actually.
So now you've actually been featured in a New York Times article in 2016, right? Where you shared your family's life in Syria and the process of moving here. Could you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So, I was in Jordan and been there for a couple of years, working over there. We were new to the country, so we do speak the language, but it's a lot of rules. It was not exist for the Syrian refugees in Jordan. And we get a phone call from the United Nations. They were like, we don't have no opening cases going to Netherlands anymore. We have going to America if you guys would like to. So the process, basically, you have to go meeting there, taking a couple pictures of you, fingerprints, all that type of information. They want to know everything, like you sitting there in the rooms for 3-4 hours.
And that must have been a really hard process, right?
It was really hard process because the same question they are asking you, they're going to ask it to your brothers to make sure if you are lying or not.
So you walked us through the process, which was going from Syria to Jordan and then to the U.S. But when it comes to your life, your daily life changing, were there any specific challenges or changes that you saw changing drastically? I know you mentioned finding jobs in Jordan was hard, but other changes specifically?
Well, the challenges was in Jordan, it's very similar to living in Syria, but you are from different countries, so trying to fit in that culture, so people stop looking at you differently, and after I fit in, they don't think I'm Syrian, they think I'm Jordanian.
Yeah, okay, so I get that what you mean, like cultural assimilation. You were just trying to kind of fit in with the crowd in Jordan so that you would be more accepted. Like, I understand what you mean by that.
This was a matter of, like, survival of the fittest, that, like, if you had to lie to almost, like, blend in.
Survive.
Then you had to, you know?
Yeah,
Are there any moments or stories that have highlighted the brevity of the conflict with your family or community that you would like to share?
Of course, nothing was really like violent, but I remember one time I was around 12, 11 years old, in 2012. One of the time was I was home, woke up, just was a helicopter throwing a rocket and shooting, and people was leaving the city. My brother called me and he said, I already left because I know the regime, they are coming to the city. So do actually have a motorcycle. He asked me to take the gas off from it because he know that when they're gonna see it, if they come in, they're gonna burn it. So I was young. I was like, okay, all right, sound good. No, it was not really violent at all. Like with my family, nothing. But with the regime, you feel the fear because everything was going on around you affect you. Like, for example, I was seeing my neighbor get arrested from the army. I was seeing my family property getting burning. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen next. That's the thing.
Rather than violence, it was more fear and tension and
between the people and the government, and perhaps even there's a misinterpretation in other parts of the world where they might think it was a more violent time.
Is it mentally? It's basically it's mentally. Like it's in Syria where the regime used to come to the city. They used to come around the whole city with tanks, with buses, with all of that. They come inside the city trying to arrest people or trying to do something. Like basically, you feel they are taking over. That's what you feel. You are living in your home. You're not doing anything. They come knocking at your door trying to do search or something. They don't have any papers to prove they have to search the house or anything. If they have a chance to steal something, if you have some money or gold or somewhere, you hiding it. If they find it, they will steal it. They will arrest you. They will say, "Oh, you are wanted." So all of that was a fear. They were trying to take an advantage of anything. Like when there's no man's in the houses, they were trying to hit it at the grave.
So, along with all this fear and just intimidation and your sense of childhood being taken away from you, I'm sure your education must have also been affected.
Seeing like firsthand how your friends were also being affected by this, and like just the community at school, also such young people being affected by these times of conflict. How did you battle negative thoughts that might have been reflecting
How did you stay positive in the midst of all this negativity?
Somehow.
Yeah, you just kept like this beacon of hope, like, oh, it's gonna end. Like you could
like remaining this optimistic mindset. You kind of maybe felt that, oh, tomorrow is going to be better than today was.
Even like in Syria, you're really not allowed to talk about politics and stuff like that.
Would you say the government was perhaps censoring or restricting the media?
Absolutely, yeah. People were really not talking about that much about politics back then.
We're always in fear of like someone's listening, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in trouble if I say this. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, actually you will get in trouble, like a big trouble. You will end up being a number, not a name, in a jail, one of the Syrian jail.
From what you've been telling us, we can see that this conflict has grown to like an immense size, and it's gained an international title. On that topic, do you have any thoughts on the international response to this conflict?
And like what you'd like to see from the global community? Like Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, how they've taken in refugees. And
so, well, basically, I'll tell you this. A war is a business, to be honest with you. I help you, you help me with something. That's what it is. We do actually have over 5 million people in Turkey. Don't believe like they will be like, oh, they feel bad for the Syrian people, that's why they'll help them. No, it's business because they are getting paid to have a Syrian refugee in their countries, and they're not getting the best treatments. They are getting the worst treatments in Turkey. They are getting killed from Turkish people. There are people racist with them about everything. So, I mean, with Jordans, it's a different story. With Jordans, since the beginning, they never actually mentioned anything if they are against the regime or they are with the regimes. They were in between trying to help the people. They do actually welcome a lot of Syrian refugees. They do actually have the border open between each other, but they're just like a neighbor country.
So as we start to like wrap up this episode, if you could share a message with the world about your experiences and the situation in Syria, what would you say?
I would say don't ever start something where you don't have any plans. What's gonna be next? I think what happened in Syria in the beginning, it was not planned. It was just happening because
It just broke out, right?
yes.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you so much, guys.
Of course, yeah. We really appreciate you coming on and
Thank you.
We truly hope you enjoyed today's episode, and make sure you follow us on Instagram at _.beyondtheheadlines for more information on each episode, and check out our link tree in the bio for more ways to help. But remember, just by listening to Ahmad's story today, you have made the world a better place by actively choosing to further your knowledge on a global issue.
hopefully Ahmad's story sticks with you and that you share it with someone you know. And remember, a story that seems worlds away is still part of your world, and it's our responsibility to tackle society's indifference and bring awareness to stories that everyday media may not cover.
Yeah, and be on the lookout on our Instagram for upcoming episodes. Once again, thanks for listening to Beyond the Headlines, the podcast that brings a voice to the voiceless.